Retirement villages. Two words that in our society carry with them some less than desirable connotations. They're seen as places that you are put, without your input, to live out your days. Shane Jacobson is out to prove that the R word is just that, a word, challenging the misconceptions that we have about retirement village living. This is episode 2 of the R word, made in conjunction with Stockland Retirement Living.
They'd probably be a bit shocked because a lot of my friends are fairly younger than me as well, probably about 10 years younger, and I think that isn't in their sort of realm of thinking whatsoever. So if I sort of said, I'm heading off to a retirement village, they go, are you sick? What's the matter with you?
That's Carmel Salo, and if you caught the last episode of our podcast, you might remember her as the 60-year-old woman who reckons she and retirement village lifestyle are like chalk and cheese. But we're out to give her a look at some of the options around and to show her that these days retirement accommodation isn't what she imagines. One expert we've found to help us is Professor Yvonne Wells. She heads up the Lincoln Centre for Research on Ageing at La Trobe University. Over the last year or so, she's been running a study in Victoria and Tasmania to work out whether living in a retirement village has a positive impact on social participation and well-being.
Well, I want to say a couple of things about depression. Firstly, the evidence shows that depression is less prevalent in older people than it is in young people. So that the myth that older people are isolated and depressed is just that, it's a myth. Having said that, there are older people who do become socially isolated and depressed or anxious. And for those people, they may wish to think about ways of supporting their well-being as they grow older. And certainly retirement village living might be one thing that they might want to consider. It's not the solution for everybody, but it is an option that people might want to think about. So one of the things I think is really important is that people really have to visit the place and get a sense of what it's like to live there before they make a decision. Because some places will suit some people but not others. It's really difficult to make generalisations about retirement living settings in general. They vary enormously.
It seems pretty logical that this idea of horses for courses is a fairly significant thing if you're thinking about your ideal kind of retirement lifestyle. Apart from the fact that basically everyone benefits from regular social interaction and what the experts call a good support infrastructure, everything else can be made to fit. Now, because Carmel put her hand up to be our test guinea pig, we thought we should get to know her a little bit better. So we sent off our producer to find out exactly what kind of lifestyle she's dreaming up for her retirement years.
Carmel, thanks so much for allowing me to come out and hijack your work day today. I'd like to start by asking what kind of conversations you have with your family around retirement plans and potential retirement options. Obviously, you're 69, so you're young and sprightly, but have you started thinking about it yet? And do you speak to your daughters about it?
My daughters occasionally ask questions about, have you made any plans yet, or what are your plans going to be, and do you want to stay in Sydney? But on the other hand, they like the babysitting and stuff, services that they get. So we're really up in the air as far as what we're going to do. Sometimes I think, I wouldn't mind moving to the country and have a quieter life, or maybe moving up the coast.
What do you remember of being a child when you think back about all of the older people that you knew then in your life?
They seem so much older then than they appear now. Now I'm at the age that I'm at, I'm thinking, they were way older than we are at this age. The impressions were very, very different. Even thinking of my mum, who was a bit of a gadabout, and she was a busy sort of a woman. She played golf until, quite a good age. But my mum seemed very elderly at the age I'm at than I feel. My dad, unfortunately, got Parkinson's disease, and he had a series of falls, and they were in a big house with stairs. And my mum actually cracked her ribs trying to get him up after a fall. And so they had an assessment, and it was just impossible to have him at home, so he had to go into a nursing home. And it was a horrible experience for him. He really didn't like it. He was most unhappy the whole time he was there.
Do you think there's a bit of a common misconception that aged care and nursing homes and retirement villages are almost one and the same?
Yes, I think it sort of seems like the beginning of the slippery slide. The retirement village, then the nursing care. And you see quite a lot of retirement villages have care as a part of their, when you read about them. So the nursing care is part of the actual village itself.
Can you give me a bit of an idea of what you think a typical day would look like in a retirement village where you're living in your own independent home? What do you think that would feel like?
Long.
Why do you say long?
I don't know. I guess probably it's coloured by the nursing home experience, because people don't seem to make friends with each other even though they're in the same circumstances. So they seem to remain in their own little world. You know, I'm not talking about people with dementia, I'm just talking, elderly people. That's probably coloured it a little bit. And I don't know whether elderly people are very good at sort of connecting with people as a first-time scenario.
So do you think there's an argument then for going in earlier? Would you ever think that it's not a bad idea to go in earlier and potentially put down roots, start making friends, that kind of thing?
Yeah, do you know what I think would probably work better than anything else is if a group of people who are already friends discussed it amongst themselves and decided to do it that way. I think one of the things that you do when you work is you start to have a persona that your friends don't necessarily know or recognise, but that's a persona you're comfortable with because that's your day-to-day business of going to work and meeting clients and, discussing things like this. And so when you retire, all of a sudden a whole large part of your identity just goes up in the smoke, and that's difficult.
Is that something that scares you about the notion of the next sort of few years?
Yeah, it doesn't scare me so much as it just leaves me feeling quite negative about it, to be honest, yeah.
What do you think would change that?
I mean, these days, you sort of hope that there's going to be a way that you can remain active right up until the very end. I'm not just talking physically active, but mentally active as well, and, having a fairly high level of engagement with people. I think that's probably something that would maybe change.
Do you think that some people make the decision to move into retirement villages for that reason, to stay engaged?
Gosh, I don't know. I've not considered that, to be honest. I've always sort of thought that people that go into a retirement village have just had enough of everything and they want to just sort of live in the slipstream in a way. Sounds awful, doesn't it?
If we said to you, we'd love to take you for a night to have a look around a retirement village, what would you say to that?
I'd probably be really nervous, I think.
Why?
Because I've said all of this stuff about my perceptions, and sometimes it's quite a shock when you have a perception of something and then you're greeted by something that's quite different, and it can sort of throw you off balance a bit, because we usually make up our minds about things and that's it, set in concrete. It's very hard to sort of shift, but sometimes it shifts simply because it's, right in your face, I guess.
Do you think there is that possibility that, in fact, your perceptions might be?
Well, from what I'm talking to you, I'm sort of starting to get the feeling that there's something more to it than I'd originally imagined.
Interestingly, when I was talking to my mum about why she wanted to move into a retirement village rather than stay at home, one of her biggest factors was just downsizing for her and my stepfather David, and having less to manage around the house. Now, I think retirement villages are a great thing and really make sense for people like my parents. But that's probably because I come from a family of very social people. But that's the thing, that I think being at a retirement village, you end up being with a group of like-minded people who are of a similar maturity. They get a chance to tell stories, relive great memories, and I think that kind of sharing is what happens so well at a retirement village. Now, my mum was only in her early 70s when she was thinking about making the move. And I remember her telling me the reason she wanted to get it done sooner rather than later was just to get there and get settled in. Now, Barbara Squires, who is one of our experts helping navigate the options, says a lot of people think exactly the same way. And says people are divided roughly into two groups: the ones who want to go in early to put down roots and get to know the community, and the ones who make a more sudden move after some kind of life event.
I'm 68 and I've been looking at this because I live in an inner city terrace with 3 flights of steep stairs. And I know from what I've seen in the past in my time as a social worker too with older people, that sometimes if you leave it too long, something goes wrong with your health, and then you really have very little choice about where you have to go. And then if something has gone wrong badly with your health, you really don't have the energy for all the packing, the choosing, the downsizing, all of that stuff. So I think for people who make that decision early, good on them. They get time to make new relationships, put down roots, make new friendships. So it's what suits people. Everyone's different. And if you don't want to play bowls or play bingo or something, well, go and join the movie club or start a club or do what you like. But it's your choice, it's your life.
There's that same idea again, that what's good for the goose might not be good for the gander. Everyone we speak to talks a lot about actually going out and having a wander around some of these communities to see what they have on offer and see how settling in doesn't mean having to give up on your life. And it might put to bed one of the biggest misconceptions that once you move into a retirement village, all interaction with the outside world stops. It's just not true. Now, next week we'll be joined by one of Stockland's own village managers to run us through the kind of activities people can get involved in when they live in a retirement community, and also to talk a little bit about how many of the people living there still keep up their old hobbies and sports in the general community. Thank you so much for listening. Until then, I'm Shane Jacobson. This has been The R Word.
Thinking about retirement? With 65 retirement villages around Australia, Stockland knows retirees are looking for living options as unique and varied as they are. Which is why Stockland created Retire magazine, your guide to retirement village living. Learn what Retire Your Way really means. Get tips for choosing a home for now and the future. And understand the costs involved. Call 1800 72 71 70 to order your free copy or visit retire.com.au. Stockland Retirement Living. It's your place.